Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Retention Chronicles. Today, we are joined by Lexi. Lexi, thank you so much for making the time to be here. Super excited to have you today. Just to get started, I'm going to have you say hi to everyone and then give a quick intro of yourself.
Sure. Nice to be here today. My name is Lexi Montee. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Communications at Happiest Baby. You might not have heard of Happiest Baby, but you might know what SNOO is. SNOO is the first robotic baby bed. It calms crying and increases sleep. And we were just granted de novo approval by the FDA to be the first and only ever device to keep babies sleeping safely on their backs. And the reason that's super important is it's the #1 advice by AAP, World Health, CDC. And the reason for that is babies who sleep on their backs have a significantly lesser risk of SIDS or SUID. So very excited. Huge innovation for parents and for anyone who worries about the babies in their families and in their communities. And excited to be here with you today.
Yes, thank you for that. That was wonderful. We're going to dive into everything that is Happiest Baby, SNOO, FDA approval. That is so wonderful. And I'm sure any parent listening is like, wow, technology. It is bigger and brighter things ahead. Getting back sleep and helping babies, helping babies do so. So before we dive in, can you tell us just a little bit about your background, where you started and how you've gotten to where you are currently?
Yeah, my background is it reminds me of that old Steve Jobs thing. It's like, oh, hindsight is 2020. The path there is zigzaggy. I was in academia. I did a thesis in neuropsych. I wanted to, continue the legacy, the family legacy. I'm the daughter of Dr. Harvey Karp, our founder and CEO. And so he wrote these really famous parenting guides, The Happiest Baby on the Block, The Happiest Toddler on the Block. And I was really interested in the human brain and how it works. And I studied neuroscience, and it was super cool because my interest was there. And then a few years later, Obama got this huge grant going to do the sort of genome mapping happened earlier, and then sort of the brain mapping and neuroscience became super popular. So it was all an exciting time for human beings and their social behavior and how the brain works. And then I was sort of disenchanted by academia because I don't know, I thought it would be like sexy Hogwarts and having meeting conversations. And instead it was 80-page just table of contents and the instruction manual for a grant thesis. And you can't do anything without money. And long story short, my partner was an entrepreneur. My parents were entrepreneurs, just sort of launching Happiest Baby, not quite yet. And so I pivoted and left academia and went into the private sector. And I thought, where can someone who studied neuroscience and literature kind of do anything in the world that's useful? And it's marketing, right? How do you talk to people and how do you figure out how they think and what they want and what they need? And so I did a few years of marketing and consulting roles, and then jumped into lots of different brands, nonprofits. One of my favorites, kindness.org, a headphone company. So that's another hardware plus software like ours that was super innovative and was taking the cochlear emission, the autoacoustic emissions from your ears that happen, and kind of making your own hearing profile. So always tech, always cutting edge science, marrying neuroscience and kind of pop culture and music and all the fun stuff I like. And then my parents were like, hey, you're a startup consultant. We're having a startup. And this is actually really the founding story of Happiest Baby, which is wild. Pediatrician dad, decades after writing all these famous books, decades on the road, and retired from his practice, full-time speaking because he wanted to help as many families as he could. So he'd go to military bases and give out his books for free and teach them these steps called 5 S's to calm colic, because in these high stress situations, like in the military, they're more likely to, perhaps shake their baby or have, other experiences. And they're also exhausted. They needed more support. So long story short, he's at some conference and he's talking about the importance of paying attention to SIDS. It hasn't changed. We haven't been able to reduce the occurrence of SIDS in multiple decades. And somebody's giving a panel up in San Francisco and says to my dad, well, Karp, you're famous, you do something. Right. My opinion is rude heckling, but okay. And he got the idea. They went to dinner. My parents went to dinner, and he literally doodled
oh my gosh,
napkin at a restaurant in San Francisco, essentially
Stop.
98% of what SNOO looks like now. It took 5.5 years with MIT Media Labs and all of the foremost engineers in the world to figure it out. It is an extremely sophisticated piece of technology. And so then they were like, you help nascent startups launch, like come do us. And I was like, you think someone is going to put your 3-hour-old baby like in your contraption? You're out of your mind. And then
Contraption.
now I eat my words because it's the best contraption. I had a baby 1.5 years ago. She was in there. I squeaked out every inch, every dollar of my SNOO. She was in there like as long as is allowed. And it's the best invention ever. And we launched the company, and it's been such an amazing thing to watch this successful company rise and do what it does and have all the impact it's had. Like, I don't even have words. I'm going to trail off too long, but the journey has been incredible. And the founding story is truly what may not often be the case, but is that like singular inception point of like someone pressing him, doodling an idea, and then here it is.
Yeah. I mean, first, before we even dive into that, there's no such thing as going on too long. I loved all of that. It's such great background to have, especially as we're heading into talking more about just Happiest Baby and your background and the strategy behind it. It always helps me just to know the founding story. So thank you for sharing. And quick tangent, I didn't know this about you, that you had a background in neuroscience, but I did as well. That's what I studied.
God.
And then I know. So I was like, it took everything in me not to interrupt you and be like, oh my God, me too.
That's so fun.
Yeah. Right. And so I also saw the bridge between, how can I tie neuroscience into the business world? Because I, for the longest time, thought I was going to med school and then figured out I'm a generalist at heart. So specializing in one thing, it wasn't the right path for me. So that is wild that we share that background.
So, and it's such a weird, unusual thing, but it's actually getting bigger and bigger. And I'm a bit older than you, but what's interesting is in my lab, I managed a research lab at Columbia University after graduation. I wanted to get a PhD, like the whole thing. And there was a kid in my lab who was a double major in neuroscience and computer science. And I was like, this fool is going to put chips in brains. I know it.
Yeah.
So it was a wild time in science. I mean, it still is. Look what's happening now. And, that's a whole other conversation we can have again later with AI. But certainly I think like everything about people comes in super handy marketing collateral wise. I mean, if you understand like how humans gaze, you can be like, oh, let's really sort of prioritize this piece of content to be in the upper right corner, or, like little things that I think probably help.
Yes. Oh, 100%. And too, like one of the things that always stuck with me as a professor that I was speaking to, was talking about just the intersectionality of human behavior and neuroscience. And one of the things he said was, there's never going to be a moment where understanding how people react and interact won't be helpful to you in your career, whatever you go into, right? Like,
or just to be a person.
Yeah, exactly. Like you will always have to interact with someone somewhere doing something. So the better that you can understand how to convey your message properly, and then how to receive messages and how to, work with other people, is like, it stuck with me forever. And now I see it, in every single conversation. I feel like that influences the way I go about things, because it's just such a helpful lens to have on the world.
Yeah.
I did want to ask too, you said with just SNOO in general and the sophisticated technology that your father rolled out with the company has been the impact that it's had on parents and families and babies. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you was about the experience on the website, because the word of mouth marketing, I think we could both agree, and many marketers I'm sure listening, is very powerful. And being able to get, testimonials up on your site is impactful. But for something like this, where not having kids myself, I know the impact of having a child it really impacts your sleep, and like the parents feel that a lot.
Absolutely.
So
well, look, I mean, we're a mission-driven company, and the mission is going to sound simultaneously very like ethereal and nebulous and loose, but also it's really specific and succinct. The mission is to really protect the health and wellness of babies and parents and families and healthcare workers. And so, it sounds kind of like, okay, good luck, sir.
Yeah. You're like, how do you achieve that?
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Super small potatoes.
Yeah.
But we do that. And I think getting those testimonials on sites or having that evangelical tribe, I've never seen a community like ours for a product, right? Like influencers might have one, personalities or a doctor or some kind of more content oriented person might have one, but for a brand that sells stuff, we have almost 300,000 influencers, followers on Instagram. We have, such a dedicated community who comes to our defense when there's a troll instance online. And I think it's because, as you said, we help people at the most critical, crucial, overwhelming, life-changing, shocking experience of their whole life, right? Like here you have this baby and then you go home from the hospital and you're like, they let me take it home. Like there's no more visiting, there's no more monitoring, there's no more like adults with experience coming in and out of the room. I mean, like you get home and you're like, holy shit, who let me do this? I can't do this, right?
Yeah.
And that's been the experience of a lot of my friends. For baby one, I only have one, but for baby two, they're kind of like, thank you, under your arm, let's go. Go home.
They're like, I'm ready. Yeah.
That's the thing. And it's the culture. Look, as all this technology evolves, as we as women could study something so, out of this world and robust and scientifically complicated as neuroscience, women are getting educated these days very differently and in the workforce very differently than we were in history. And so this is my pedestrian analysis, but this anthropological idea I have is that as women, especially here in the US, we're able to get that a lot more of that equity, not saying we don't have a long way to go, but as we were really getting educated and going to work in droves differently than we were in the past, we weren't around mom, grandma, auntie, neighbor to help each other raise children and to learn. And so there wasn't that sort of like mimetic dissemination of cultural bits, right? So we forgot to swaddle, in North America, and we didn't learn about other tips and tricks for calming babies. And so when Harvey's first book came out over 20 years ago, it's not like he invented swaddling or white noise. These are things that have existed in the world, but he reminded us, before then, nobody in the US was really swaddling, and there wasn't such a thing as a swaddle blanket. Fun fact, I worked in the office, and we were naive. This was like the very beginning of the internet practically days in terms of your daily consumption. And so people would Google our office, and we put our phone number online. They'd call our phone and they'd say, hi, I'm reading Dr. Karp's book. Where can you buy one of these swaddling blankets that you talk about? And we were like, oh, like, sorry, he's just a pediatrician. We don't know. So we recommend going to the fabric store and buying at least 42 inches in a square shape. Like that was it. And now swaddles are like a multi-billion-dollar industry. So a lot has changed. And I think that's why people needed us so badly. And that's why they still come to our site. So as you talked about organic marketing, 60%, plus or minus, depending on the day, I guess, but a lot of people, the majority of our web traffic is completely organic. They're coming to us for tips. We have a very thorough, robust, helpful blog. My own girlfriends are like, well, Happiest Baby blog said this. I'm like, oh, did I approve that article? Because I don't remember that exact, I don't remember that content. Funny. Like, but so, I mean, everybody I know around us is depending on us for this content. And so to have a doctor, to have a founder, be a pediatrician with 4 decades of experience is really critical for us. And then I was able as a marketer to take that and to leverage that into brand credibility, brand ownership, equity amongst the community. They can now inform each other. They send each other links. And then when something helps them so much, when you really are, I mean, not to like eye roll at these sort of key terms that are common in the startup space, but like when you are mission driven, when you put the people first, when you give them the content for free, right now, for example, everybody's in these Substacks. You don't have to pay money to get our information. We're giving it to you for free. The contents of our books that cost, money, or the videos that cost money to buy or to stream, it's all in there for free. And when you do that, you're bringing them to your site and you're helping them so much in addition to doing it for free, that they want to give you that testimonial. I feel like they want to scream from the rooftops, like, oh my God. And they kind of like, one of the dreaded questions that you get as a new parent is like, oh, how's the baby sleeping? And they like that, right? Because they can say like, well, I knew all these tricks for the 5 S's, and that translated over into SNOO, because SNOO's invention was sort of predicated upon these, right? Shushing, swinging, swaddling, all the stuff that's automatically done for you in a SNOO, but you were still manually doing based on the Happiest Baby on the Block book. And now they have a skill set. And so they can go and share their good experience. And, it reminds me of like when you find a good mascara, right? Like you tell all your friends. And that's
Yes.
just mascara. Imagine how much you would, glow about
with
it.
a full-blown baby.
Yeah, exactly. So
Living
that's
source,
been great
yep.
for us. I will say what's fascinating is when you look at a website, and when you look at comparing that browser experience, whether it's desktop or mobile, but just like an actual D2C website with community, social media, very different. On social, people love the testimonials. They want to hear what people experienced. Was it worth the money? Did you have any issues? What was it like for you? On the website, people don't really click on them. It's interesting. They love the reviews, the written reviews. They want to see how many stars you gave and what the problem was and what the good parts were. And they want to read them and make sure they review them. But in terms of like a video testimonial, not really a clicked on item. So an interesting difference between social and community and then web.
Yeah, I love that you pulled that out, because I haven't heard that distinction with social and website, and I was reading some newsletter, I think it was the Raisin Bread newsletter done by Marketing Hire, but Instagram just released something, I don't know, don't know the actual name of it, but in that release that they're starting to let brands use UGC as their ads. And so, I am a shopper online and use social as, that piece of referral, or I'll go look at like comments and see what, who's experienced what with different products before I buy. And it's so interesting to me that you brought up that testimonials do really well on social, and you've seen that. And to me, especially, I don't know if you're on TikTok. I mean, it's the Gen Z in me, but seeing all the comments that people will have and be like, oh, this was my experience. This was like where to buy it, when to get it, blah, 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 all the details that you could think of. It is so powerful if you have that community that is willing to go to bat and say,
Yeah.
I really trust this product because it helped me so much in this very critical time of my life.
Because they do the legwork for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like taking Reddit and Amazon and all the different things together, and then they do it for you. And what I love about what you said about using UGC as an ad is like, okay, here's an example. You go on Yelp. I don't know, like, is he canceled or whatever happened? But Aziz Ansari had this stand up and he was like, was it him? I think it was him. He's like, we're the generation that like Yelps a taco for 45 minutes before you go, right? And it's true. Like, this is hard. Like when you're having a baby, you're especially careful. Like, what are the ingredients? What is this? Is this good enough? Is it safe? Like, there's so little and delicate, and you're so afraid, especially if it's your first time, you don't know what you're doing. And so for the generation, for like the millennials who were the first people to have to deal with the internet, the amazingness that came, but also the information overload that comes, if I am the person who maybe looks up, not Yelp anymore, but like Infatuation, looks up the food for 45 minutes, like I don't have the time to give the good enough level of research for my baby product. And so the other thing that was interesting to me about being of that generation is like, if somebody on Yelp, or like, especially back in the day, TripAdvisor, gave a review, I didn't care what they said, because I didn't have confidence that we had the same personality, or that person had a discerning palate, right? Like for cuisine, and had, had enough experience, maybe like eating abroad or something. And so I didn't know if I could trust them. With social media, you can tap on the person's profile, and as long as they're public, you can see like, okay, we vibe. You can figure out geographically where they live, maybe even politically, how they might vote and what their morals might be. You look at their aesthetic and if you vibe. And so then you're like, cool, this person looks good enough. And unfortunately, if you see they have a bigger following, while we do, especially now, and I think the average consumer has become very savvy over the years. So we know that there's advertising and paid relationships or gifted product, right? on social. So maybe you take it with a grain of salt, but you also know that if they do have that large following you see, you kind of take that as like, okay, they have to tell the truth because their community will come for them or their engagement will suffer. And so then it kind of verifies the opinion. And so all the heavy lifting is done. And especially, if there's a product you've seen and that all the people you already follow. So rather than it being like random UGC where you're doing a little digging, if it happens to be influencers you follow that made the ad, you're now just trusting them. And if you're seeing it repeatedly across different handles, you're like, oh, hell yeah, what is this thing everyone's been doing, right? We see that with, certainly with SNOO everywhere. Everyone has a SNOO. I've never seen a pregnant person at this point online who doesn't have a SNOO, or with seed probiotics or with athletic greens. Like there's just a couple of brands where you're like, this is everywhere. And it does a little bit of that like old fashioned, like television style marketing where like, you're not anybody if you don't also have this, you know what I mean? So,
right. Yeah. Like the FOMO marketing.
A different time in advertising, but it's great to have that evangelism, to have the people who are bought in, who do the legwork for each other and educate each other. It's fantastic.
Yeah, there's so much power behind it. And that's why I think both of us too, just with knowing our backgrounds, right? It like the FOMO marketing and being able to see the influence of having someone and multiple people, if that's what's going on, having them give credibility to something. It has something that's beyond, a stat or something like that, where because it's emotional and that's inherently hard to describe or hard to measure. And one of the things that I was thinking about while you were talking was there's now, for better, for worse, so many options out there, just when you're talking about different products, and, some industries have way more options than others, right? Like SNOO is one of its kind. But there's a lot of other products that there's just such a high need. And like, even like with fast fashion, being able to turn around something really quick, or being able to, with things like Shopify, being able to start business and having so many things at your fingertips. I know as a consumer, one of the things that I feel like I need to do before I buy a product is do my due diligence and make sure that I'm looking at different products, looking at reviews, looking at anything that I can find, because I know myself, I'm susceptible to, if I just buy something on impulse, then that buyer's remorse will come in. And if
but I have to interrupt you right here.
Do Mariah. It, please.
All right.
Please.
We're both marketers. We are both marketers. Yes. And we know the algorithms. We understand how they, how they are really directed at us and how they are targeting us. But tell me that you haven't found ads helpful, right? Like at this point, helpful. I'm no longer talking about or Googling, like forget the whole, like they're listening or whatever. The last 3 times this happened to me this week, I was thinking about something. I didn't say it out loud. I didn't Google it. I was trying to think about if there would be an AI version of a combination of behaviors that I would have done or partaken in that would amalgamate to this
somehow. And I decided there was
still no mathematical possibility. So essentially it read my mind that I really needed this product. And the funny thing is, I don't even remember what it is to tell you the example. I just remember being so baffled at like my, midnight doom scroll before I fell asleep that like, wow, I really needed this. How did they know? And then I clicked it and I bought it in 3 seconds, and I didn't do any research because the price point was low enough where I was like, okay, like fine. And because I really needed it. And if you're the first to target me and you look good enough, and like I tapped on the handle name and the Insta was legit, like, cool, okay, I'm done. So you have to tell the truth. You fall for it too, even though you know the guts, right?
Oh, 100%. If it's something I need and it it appears in an ad, then yeah, I am totally all right, clicking on that link, checking out the handle, making sure that, everything looks fine, like that little amount of verification, and then I'm in. Like, I think,
yeah. And that's the thing for marketers too. It's like, there's always, for us, there's not a best practice, right? Like touch them infinity times until they convert. And you always have that trepidation. Is it too much? Are we annoying? Are they sick of seeing us in their feed? Are they going to hide and mute us? But I don't think so, because I'm really busy and I think I just like forget, or I'm waiting for it to be on sale, or I don't know what my reasoning is, but sometimes the relentless ones also get me. So that works, right?
Or you just like scroll by and then you forget about it 2 seconds later, right? Because we consume so much.
Totally.
I remember, so do you know Mary Ruth's Organics? Like they're
Yeah,
like
yeah.
vitamins. Yeah. So I remember seeing an ad, and this was on TikTok. So it was some influencer just like talking about their experience with it and talking about all the benefits. And I was like, oh my God, that's like cool. I should like look into that. And then forgot about it. Right. And I was like, I'll add it for the list. And then saw another influencer who made a similar video, but like different benefits. And then immediately I was sold, because I was like, after the first ad I saw, it was good enough that it like stuck with me a little bit. And then the second one, I was like, okay, now I have to try this. And I have it and I love it. And now I'm in,
Amazing.
right?
Yeah.
And so
And
yeah, I think
now you're going to tell your friends, and that's how it works. And so it all circles
exactly.
back to that, like that organic traffic. I mean, that word of mouth, it's priceless. And we're so
Yeah.
grateful for it, because what for us in particular, sometimes cosmetics are just cosmetics. But for us, like we're out there doing really hard work trying to help people. I mean, illnesses have strong correlation with sleep, mental health and mental
Mm-hmm.
hygiene, and a lot of other, issues are correlated with sleep. Sometimes even like breastfeeding issues for moms, if they can get good sleep, maybe they can help improve their milk production or their flow. And so sleep is really critical for a lot of things. Not to say that SNOO can help those things, but if SNOO can help you sleep, you can like regenerate your own body or your own emotional well-being and get yourself those things. That's priceless.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%. What sleep is one of those things that I have always prioritized. Like even when I was younger, my mom would be like, you were like 10 hours always, like minimum.
Amazing.
And even in college too, like I would just, if any professors are listening, you didn't hear this, but would just like, I was like, you know what, at a certain time I'm not effective, like I am going to bed, like doesn't matter on the exam tomorrow, whatever, right? And even now, like past college, I like and into my career, I've just been so, I know the importance of it, and it's probably because of neuro background, but it's been great because I think, sleep, everyone is hopefully knows that it's important, but now more of the science is starting to back it, and that, there's only so much that you can do to help XYZ, but like sleep it touches so many different things. And so that's where I think like, and even not being a mother myself, I have seen SNOO, and like, I was like, I know if and when the time happens, I was like, I will be purchasing so quickly, because to me, that is something that is, you can't even put a price tag on it, right? If you are fortunate enough to be able to afford such a great product that can help so many other things in your life, to me, I'm like, oh my God, that is it. It's astronomical, like the influence it can have.
Yeah.
And so it's so awesome. Yeah. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about just marketing in general, which I love going on those tangents. But I wanted to circle back real quick, because the original thing that you said that spurred us on that tangent was having testimonials be on the website, because they're probably a necessity, right? Like you need to see some of them, but then having reviews as well. So this is getting more into the customer experience side of things. How are you capturing those reviews to put on your website? How are you making sure that, as a marketer, you're doing your very best to make sure that the customer experience is well-rounded and you can give all the information to your customers, whether it's, in a review or in a blog, which we'll talk about as well.
Well, I mean, we also happen to use Klaviyo like probably so many people do. And so we're just on like we set a certain amount of days post-purchase that we ask them to do a review. I would surmise that human behavior, probably the most incentivized people to do it are the ones who like had the most phenomenal killer experience. Just, this is the best thing ever happened to me, saved my life, saved my marriage, saved
Mm-hmm.
my sanity. And we hear that same couple compliments over and over again, which feels
Wow.
good, but also I think speaks to that, the strength of your product, and what it is you do for people. And then I think the other side of that is the other incentivized group are people who are pissed, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And so
Yeah.
lucky for us, it's not that many, but it happens to anyone. It's impossible to, appease and make happy 100%.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
for us, a part of that experience is really dedicated to, we have a complicated product. It is a very sophisticated piece of machinery. The box comes to your house. It weighs 53 pounds. It's huge. Like, this is a serious thing. There's an automotive drivetrain inside. It's on drone suspension. Like the only more robust thing on the market essentially is a car. And so as a result, you know, they, I think, are really invested. They have high expectations. It's expensive for a lot of families. You can both buy and rent it. So that's what's fantastic. So people for whom buying is not an option, renting is a few bucks a day. So as much as you would spend on extra coffee to get through being tired is literally how much you can rent a SNOO for, which is amazing. But they have really high expectations, or, you know, whatever it might be. Or they, I think what's hard for a brand like ours, and there's many brands that have amazing sort of reputations that precede them, but like there's also expectation management. Like if everyone in the world is raving about this thing and it's the best thing in the world, and so you picked for it to be your one splurge, you know, you may not know that it's working really well for you, even if it is. So great example of this is I have a younger cousin in my mind. I'm like, younger cousin, we're all, you know, above the age, we're all in our 30s and having kids. And she said to me, she got a phone call from her friend who was like, oh, SNOO is not working for us. I can't function like this. Like we're going to get a divorce. Like everything's so hard. And I didn't like mean to sound, you know, at all, whatever in my imitation, but the punchline is her 3-week-old baby was already sleeping 5-hour stretches a night. That's like,
wow,
fantastic. But she didn't know. She was young. She didn't do research. She bought it because all the other influencers and all her friends had it. And so hearing about the magic pill, like we also have a heavier burden than other companies do, because we have to teach folks regular baseline baby behavior, right? A non-SNOO baby is waking up every 2 hours, maybe 3 hours. Some babies every 30 or 45 minutes. Wow. And 3 weeks in, she's like 5 hours a night isn't enough. And so it's a hard thing, right? When you're like, actually, this is working for you. You just don't know it. But of course, like she called customer care and got some great tips from our staff. But again, these are like really complicated points, right? Because there's a lot of inextricable relationships between things like, you know, feeding the baby and their sleep. Are they hungry? Are they satiated? Are they getting enough? Are they breastfeeding versus formula feeding? So many questions. So we have highly, highly, highly trained agents. And so all of this is to say that the experience is really delicate and it's a fantastic journey. A lot of our good reviews are actually about the customer care. And then what happens is if we do get a bad review, we really take the time to do an in-depth response. And that's live on the website. So for anybody who's reading those reviews, and then they can see our response and get kind of the more statistically based and larger sense of the person's personal problem. It also, I think, is a really great benefit because it allows a person to decide, okay, should I take this with a grain of salt where they may be a more like an outlier type of person, or are they just like pissed about, I don't know what, shipping or something that has nothing to do with the product, right? You see that all the time in
yes. In our industry, especially, like that's where we're in with.
Or, you know, exactly. And so there's a lot of places. And so by having that really great customer care interaction on our review section of our website, I think it's an excellent place for, in a way, to do more marketing, but on a real like person to person level to just help somebody who might be having a hard time. And we've seen that actually turn it around. Like someone might say like, I don't know if this is working for me. Like my friends' kids all sleep 12 hours a night. And then when we talk to the person, you know, we get through a couple of tips on our app. You can customize the settings of the bed. So some babies need more noise or more motion or all these other tips that we have. Or sometimes we're able to say like, how old is your baby? And then they can say like 4 weeks old. And we have to say like, oh, that young a baby has to eat, you know, 12 times a day. So, and so we're able to help them get through the hard parts, which is really rewarding. But I think it then demonstrates the customer journey, both of an existing customer, whether they're, you know, happy or not retention wise, and then also of prospective customers who are coming on there to see the info.
Yeah, there's so many things I want to dive into there, Lexi. Oh my gosh. Okay. So that was one of the things that stood out, is just the fact that, like you said, perspective, right? Sharing like, okay, if a new parent doesn't know what's average for a baby or what to expect or anything, like with expectation management, that's such a fascinating thing to tie into reviews, because, and just overall customer experience, because I could see how, yeah, if you're just speaking with other parents and they're, you know, it's hindsight's 2020, or as you get further from events in your life and you've had more time, you know, you just tend to look at them from a more positive experience than when you're in it currently. And so if you're only talking to parents that, you know, maybe have kids who are a little bit older than the current newborn that you have, it's easy to maybe look and be like, oh my God, they're not sleeping like at all. Right. Like, well, meanwhile, it's that 5-hour example. And I think one of the things that I see, or I could see a potential for, is the comparison game that I'm sure is so real. I've only heard about it, right? Like, this is just from secondhand experience, but with parenting and trying to advise someone on their parenting style, or what is average, what is normal. That's such a tough dynamic to lie in that industry, obviously, that you're in. You have to
And I have to stop
be
you right
able
there.
to do
Sorry to
so.
interrupt, but you know what
Yes,
else?
do it.
It's hard. There are very concrete safe sleep guidelines, not just in the US, but kind of cohesively across all developed nations, which is like nothing in the bed until age 1. So no pillow, no blanket, no stuffed animal, like nothing, nothing, nothing. And when you talk about how delicate it is to tell someone how to parent, I mean, even just like trying to, every time someone tags us in a story, which is getting bigger and bigger every day, gently teach my team to go in there and like give the safe sleep tips, because God forbid something happens to that child. You want to know that you warned somebody and reminded them, but also like delicately treading to like not be rude or hurt their feelings, or it's unsolicited advice. You know, it's really hard because that's not even in our lane in a way, because they already made the purchase. They already have the SNOO. They're already at home. They're happy. They love us. They're tagging us in stories, but we still want to make sure that we're helping save their baby potentially if they're doing something wrong by following an unsafe sleep practice, like having blankets in the bed at too young an age. And it's hard, man. It keeps us up at night, all of us, because we're like dancing delicately, exactly what you talked about.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people hopefully listening to this and maybe have experienced it, where they see a practice where it's like, oh, wait, like maybe that's just the education that has to be shared. And I think that's what's so great with that robust blog that you spoke about earlier, with, you know, your friends sharing just content based off of, you know, like, this is what's average and this is what is, you know, what to expect, and all that to say that I think that's one of the things that, like, I wanted to ask you about. How are you sharing that information? Is it like, are you sending out emails to customers after they buy, like kind of getting the post-purchase experience? And I know that's where Malomo typically, you know, that's where our expertise is. So even like my mind was, of course, going to ideas, but I wanted to ask you about it because I think that's something that a lot of parents can relate to, but maybe or not maybe, but it's really hard to put into practice and do that delicately at such a big scale, you know, rather than like
No,
a
you're
one-to-one
right.
outreach.
It is hard to do at a big scale. It's kind of like what I say about America when people, you know, talk badly about the government. And I'm like, listen, I get it, but like, we have hundreds of millions of people across 50 states on a big ass chunk of land. Like, it's not easy, right?
Or
And so
floating in the sea. Yep.
yeah, exactly. It's not easy because there's no monolith, right? Like I was just giving a lecture at a master's program at NYU last night, and one of the things I was saying is like, people love branding, people, marketing people love to be like, what's your persona, or what's your, you know, what's your customer profile, or what's your community member's personality? And I'm like, that's the problem. It's not a monolith, right? Like, just because you all have like, I don't know, a chapstick in common doesn't mean you have anything else in common. And so really, I'd rather you get me, you know, 10 or 20 many different personas. And so to that same point, I think, you know, we get like 1.5 million blog readers a month. And
Wow. Oh
the
my gosh.
past, on a good month, we almost hit 2 million. That's a lot of pressure. We take it seriously. It's a big responsibility, especially with what's at stake. We're not giving like cheek contouring tutorials, you know, like we're teaching
Yeah.
you a good schedule to feed your baby and make sure that they're going to hit their milestones, or when to be worried about something, or to encourage them to speak to doctors, or, you know, these big, big life moments. And so we take the responsibility very seriously. Being founded and run by a pediatrician who cares very deeply. He's a fellow of the American Academy of Pediatrics. He's on several boards. And then, you know, he cares deeply about things that aren't as maybe common always in every medical community, like, you know, the environmental working group. He's on the board there. So protecting children from pesticides and chemicals in their self-care products, like so many different avenues we have. And so research matters to us. We're very careful to be very mindful. We don't use hyperbole on the blog. I use it a lot in my speech, if you probably hear, but
Right.
in our branding, we don't. We have a very calm, middle of the road voice. We only believe in science. We follow the data. We cite everything. So you can find medical journals at the bottom of our blog posts and make your way to them and read them for yourself if you would like to. You know, obviously most people aren't really trained to do so, but they can appreciate the citation, so they can at least click and see, you know, what university did the study, or maybe the names of some of the researchers or something. So we take the responsibility seriously of having that faith from our community. And we really respect them, and we want to show them that respect in what we write. And similarly, because we're a very serious company and now is officially a medical device, we're very careful to always do diligence and do things correctly. So I joke, my team hates it, but one of our business systems data guys and our attorney, I call them the compliance police. And so they teach me everything when GDPR happened, and then when CCPA happened. And at that point, I mean, I remember saying to them once, like 5 years ago, like, what do you want me to do? Take out a classified ad in the newspaper? Like, marketing is going to be really hard after everything you just told me. So it's had to evolve, but we take that seriously as well. We take the law seriously. We take the compliance seriously. And so our voice, the brand, is something that I think really matters. And so again, content on the website, very middle of the run, like very calm. You know, most baby brands might have like a little too much wink or whimsy and not enough seriousness. And I love that. But, you know, we also have a doctor at the helm, so it can't be too fun, right? And then conversely, it can't be too medicine-y and scary. And so same thing goes for our blog, and then for the way that we disseminate that information. So we have a newsletter. You can sign up for it. You get all the typical like modals and pop-ups, and you visit the site. And the newsletter usually hits on baby toddler parents, so that there's something relevant for everyone. Because segmentation is hard, and especially if you're a small and scrappy team, it can be a hard thing to have time to do really well. So we want to make sure we're inclusive. And then we have, of course, the post-purchase flow, but the compliance police is very clear that the post-purchase flow is really transactional. Product information, product education, and like no fluffery and no marketing. So that's hard for me as a marketer. I like,
I love it.
I can't subscribe to it, not to use, you know, a matching verb here, but it's hard. It's really hard, but we want to follow the rules. So we're really careful there as well. We now also have text marketing. We've had that for probably 2-ish, almost 3-ish years. So that's like where you can be like a little more liberal. They opted in and asked you to text them. And there's something different about the voice, the casual demeanor on your phone. Like, it's a little more pithy. It has some emojis, right? It's a different vibe than how you might market on a doctor-driven website with a robust blog of educational content. But the main ways that we disseminate that information is we take all those blog posts, we reshare them in stories, we amalgamate them into this like group, you know, fun email, newsletter. And then there are other flows, of course, that you might get put into, depending on what product you were browsing for. And it's just, I think the one hardship we have that other brands might face, but I think we face more than most, is education. Education is tough. And so then I worry about, well, open rates, and especially transactional emails versus newsletters. And like, am I getting them the information? Are they learning what they need to learn, so that I can know that, you know, our job is done and the diligence is done and they know everything? Because I'm afraid that, you know, people throw away the user guide, right? Like, people don't want to read anymore. They want you to just tell them. And so we also
they just want to know.
Yeah, just tell me what taco. I don't want to spend 45 minutes yelling it.
Exactly.
And so I think that's why the QR codes are really great, you know, because then fine, like, open the box. I don't want to read. QR code takes you straight to a video, or it takes you straight to a blog post, and FAQs as well. We embed them online, so people can like search them and then not have to always contact customer care. So we have a very, very robust set of FAQs. And we also have blog posts that get into more length or have a video embedded from the FAQ as well. But yeah, we do all the same things that you were mentioning, about using that opportunity to give them information post-purchase. We just are really careful in terms of subscribership. We're not trying to like annoy people or do anything non-compliant.
Yes. Yeah. And that's one of the things that, I mean, I'm not on the technical side of things, right? Like, with the compliance and transactional emails and marketing, and the intersectionality of all of them, it is so fascinating just to be a marketer at this time and see how privacy changes are changing the way that marketers are approaching different like categories, and how I think the way that, at least from this conversation, what I'm seeing is like the way that you all approach transactional emails and communications and just marketing, even marketing collateral in general with those blog posts or reviews or whatever it is. It speaks to that brand of, you are making sure that everything that you are putting out there is intentional and purposeful, and it isn't bothersome, right? Because your clients or your customers are in such a busy phase of their life.
Yeah.
Right. So trying to be aware of that, I think it speaks to your brand. And even if it isn't, emojis all over the website and the typical, D2C experience, and I'm using air quotes with that for our listeners, of having something that is lighthearted and fun, or like super colorful or whimsical, fluffy, whatever, however you want to describe that experience. I think it makes sense for the product that you're selling and the experience that you want your customers to have. And I think I also hear you in like, you want to make sure that the proper information is landing. And even if, your compliance police are saying the transactional emails are not the spot to put some of that marketing collateral, I think QR codes and other use cases like that, hopefully if other marketers are in a similar experience, they're able to look at maybe unique ways that they can make sure that they're delivering that content, like the newsletter. And I think it's so great that you guys segment by, age of someone's child, because I could see, already chaotic enough, needing just to be like, okay, this is what the information I need, like take a spoonful and go.
Yeah. But it's hard. Like, I think something that's interesting is, so in SNOO, you get 3 SNOO sacks when you buy a SNOO: small, medium, and large. So you essentially have everything you need and a sheet, and they're all organic and they're machine washable. So like you can just toss them in the machine. But like, for example, I have really slow washing machines, right? Like I live in New York, and so they're like condensating dryer. It takes like hours. And so for me, it was important to have backup SNOO sacks when I had a baby. And so it's hard because I want to go to the compliance police and say, hey, this is product relevant. This is helpful to somebody. I'm not trying to market them sacks to sell them. I actually literally just want to help them and say, hey, poop happens, right? Like, spit happens, like things happen.
Yeah. Chaos.
If you need a set of backup, or what's a good age or weight to size up into your next size, I want to help them. And so being that IoT enabled device and having a companion app, like I really want to talk to them in the app and send messages that's like, hey, I see here that your baby's like 4 weeks old, try the louder sound and motion, or try, buy a new sack, or don't forget that you'll need your medium soon. And so what's hard about laws, and as they change when it comes to tech and to privacy, is the laws move a lot slower than the technology. And so even now with AI and ChatGPT, we've been seeing so much stuff happening where, like, yes, it was trained to not have malice, but you can take your malintent and reframe it and then ask it like the opposite. What am I not supposed to do? And then it'll tell you all the things, right? And so is there a way that we could like go to Congress and say, like, can you caveat the legislature and be like, okay, but transactional post-purchase emails, if they are not opted into marketing emails, but you have, or any communications for that matter, texts, app, but you have information that could be really helpful or that is integral to using the product, SNOO won't turn on if your sacks aren't clipped in, because that's the entire safety part. That's why the FDA just gave us this de novo approval to keep babies on their backs. You've got to clip them into the sack and zip the sack up. And if it's 3 o'clock in the morning and your baby just had diarrhea all over that sack, you have 2 options: sleep somewhere else in a less safe space, or try to wash that thing and you both stay awake, or something catastrophic, right? Like none of these options are good. So I would argue that, in certain instances for a product's actual use, or for the safety and benefit of the customer, if you're allowed to communicate a little more frequently, that would be nice. But we'll see what happens, and we'll see how much marketers kind of push back on that. And then the other thing is like, you know, risk, right? Like take some risks, maybe as a marketer, talk to your legal teams and decide when and where you're more comfortable communicating or advertising or whatever it is that you're doing in whatever channel you're in. But, you know, do you have to be 100% perfect students of everything? Like, I'm not sure, but certainly ask your leadership teams, ask your lawyers, but don't just like take it, because in our case, like it would help a family to communicate a little more and help them out.
Yeah. I love that message. Honestly, I think that key factor of like communicating and trying to see where that balance between taking some risks and making sure that you're still obviously compliant. I think that's a great note to end on, because I know we're here at time and it flew by, which is crazy, but yeah. But we were having so much fun with it. So I wanted to thank you for coming on the podcast again, Lexi. It's been such a great time getting to chat with you, and learn from you all along.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. And I don't know, like talking about it, I'm like, well, good luck to everyone. No, it's a hard time. It's a fun time. It's a fun time in marketing, and to see what all the tech does and brings. Yes, of course, we wish there weren't like Safari and Google and other algorithmic and privacy changes, but also it helps us get creative. You know, it brings us back to the days of Gorilla from our youth, where we're like chalking the sidewalk. So that's also
right.
You know?
Oh, that's a fun one. Oh my gosh. I don't even want to stop the episode there, because we could talk, I feel like, for so much longer. But yes, yeah, I agree. It brings out the creativity, which is always fun to see.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, and so nice to chat and talk soon.
Yes, you as well.
Bye.